Hi everyone, I've got a nice simple question from Jessica for this week's AMA, which is what is your opinion on International Women's Day? Um, I guess the short answer is I think it's a bit dumb. Basically, the only women in the world who benefit from the existence of International Women's Day are female pundits, including me, who are more likely to get invited on the telly or to do speaking engagements or whatever because media and other organisations are looking for women to speak on International Women's Day and to speak about women's things. So, at the risk of looking a gift horse in the mouth, I think it's a bit silly. I don't care that much either way, except that I don't love the propaganda effort that it represents, right? So, International Women's Day, unlike Mothering Sunday or Valentine's Day or any of these other festivals, sort of folk festivals, is not a long-standing celebration. It is a recent invention. It dates back to the early 20th century. And more importantly, it's always been sort of explicitly political. So from the beginning, it was an idea spawned by socialist movements and suffrage movements, and I guess first wave feminist groups to draw attention to women political problems that women have experienced. It obviously hasn't really turned into that's not really what it's about now. The stuff that gets run in the papers on International Women's Day tends not to be politically controversial. It tends to be girl bossy kind of girl power stuff, which is obviously slightly annoying. I don't really like these sort of compulsory political holidays. So people outside the UK might not be aware of this, but recently the London Mayor Sadiq Khan, I live in London, renamed some parts of the London Transport Network with breaking convention. So normally the London Tube Network is named after either where the tube line goes or after monarchs of some kind. So there's the Victoria line and the Jubilee line and the Elizabeth line and so on. Monarchs, I mean, obviously, diehard Republicans would say that monarchs are political figures, but the constitutional monarchy that we have now is kind of deliberately non-political. It's a safe, neutral thing to name a tube line after. What Sadiq Khan has done, breaking with that tradition, is he has named the lines after basically woke things, right? For want of a better term. So the suffragette line is one of them, the Windrush line. So that's referring to the first wave of Caribbean migration to the UK post-war. And the Lionesses line, named after the English women's football. And the Mildmay line, which is named after a hospital which was involved in the HIV and AIDS crisis of the 80s in particular, and has done good work in treating patients. Obviously, the function of so that 2/3 of the names had some kind of like identity politics relevance, right? And so you got two for women. I mean, the funny thing about suffragette one is that people remember the suffragettes now as being these freedom fighters. The suffragettes were terrorists. The suffragettes tried to kill people. It's quite bizarre that they didn't end up killing people because they tried loads and loads of times. They were just bad at building bombs. They were a very extremist group. Suffragists, who were the much larger and more moderate group of suffrage activists, didn't like the suffragettes and thought that they were really damaging the cause, which they probably were. And also it probably actually had nothing to do, like their activism probably didn't really lead to women's suffrage, given that women's suffrage was secured in all parts of the developed world at basically the same time, probably had a lot more to do with both the First World War and with other economic and technological changes. That's probably for another day. Anyway, it's really weird to be valorising the suffragettes now, 100 years later, particularly when Sadiq Khan put out tweets kind of promoting this, and he used a picture of Millicent Fawcett, who's famously not a suffragette. She was a suffragist. The suffragettes and the suffragists did not like each other very much. Anyway, I don't like this politicized, I don't like compulsory political stuff in this. I don't like this partisan stuff, okay, particularly when it's dressed up as not being partisan. And it's one of the things that I don't like about International Women's Day very much. There is obviously an International Men's Day. Lots of men's rights activists who are incredibly annoying will make a big fuss about, oh, when's International Men's Day? Right. There's like a grain of truth there in the sense that people don't really care about International Men's Day, whereas International Women's Day gets a lot of fanfare. Men's rights activists interpret this as being evidence that men are an oppressed group. I don't think that's true. I think that the reason why, well, okay, so going back to the tube lines thing, wokeness takes of a kind of core Christian idea, which is that there is virtue in being weak, and that the first shall be last and the last shall be first. Okay, that we should valorize and protect the weak, and we should humble the strong. It's a Christian idea. It's not an idea, as Tom Holland makes very clear in his book Dominion. It's not an idea that's shared across other religious traditions by any means. It's certainly not an idea that Roman society in which Christianity emerged believed in at all. It was a very radical idea at the time. I think wokeism should probably best be understood as a Christian heresy in the sense that it rejects a lot of other Christian ideas, right? Wokeism embraces abortion, embraces euthanasia, the completely incompatible with Christianity in that sense. But it does take this idea that there's something really good about being weak, and there's something particularly virtuous about being marginalized, being oppressed, that makes people worthy of veneration. You look at basically the groups that wokeness is interested in prizing and representing are groups who are oppressed, either historically or now, or groups that are underperforming in some way, or groups that are disliked in some way. Basically, the people at the margins. I mean, I'm woke people, like woke people will say this explicitly, right? Like, this isn't a secret. This is at the center of the ideology. The reason why women benefit from this, well, the reason why women are a focus of concern in this ideology, the reason why women are getting 2 new London Overground lines, is because women are lower status than men. Right? I bang on about this all the time, but I think it's true, and I think it's important in order to understand what's going on with feminism and the relationship between men and women in general. Women are lower status than men. This is cross-culturally true. That doesn't mean that women are hated. That doesn't mean that all cultures are misogynist necessarily. People really hating women or men really hating women. It does happen, obviously, but it's actually quite unusual. I think that the best way of understanding the way in which women are generally regarded is that they are simultaneously actually kind of protected and adored, right? So there's this cognitive bias called the women are wonderful bias. So basically test subjects, if they're asked whether they prefer particular individuals, and changing sex is the variable, they will tend to prefer women. If they're given the opportunity to save someone's life or to do a good deed to someone, they're more likely to save the woman or do a good deed to the woman. Women actually get sort of preferential treatment, right, from both men and women in this because of this cognitive bias. So that doesn't really square right with cultures being misogynist at all. But at the same time, things that are associated with women are often considered to be lower status. You'll have noticed that boys being sissies is considered to be very terrible, very low status, very much to be avoided. Girls being tomboys is kind of fine. No one really cares. Like, when I was at school, I remember that a playground insult. This was when I was like 8 or 9 or something. A playground insult was just to call someone a woman, right? And there are lots of other playground insults which do the same thing, which basically say you're girly, you're sissy, throw like a girl. This kind of stuff is particularly insulting thing to say to boys. There's this very deeply held view that women are just women are just lower status than men. Women are lower status than men, but women are also loved at the same time. It's quite confusing, right? And I think that the best way of understanding what's going on is that women are basically considered to be child adjacent. Women are considered to be much more childlike than are men. And children, in the same way, are considered to be lower status, right? So referring to someone as being immature or juvenile or whatever is insulting. But we also love children, and if given a choice between saving a child's life and saving an adult's life, people will save the child's life. It has exactly that paradox that's at the heart of how women are regarded as well. So, and if you look at historically how women are treated in a legal sense and so on, being denied the vote, not being able to drive, not being able to make independent decisions, not having an independent legal identity, being able to own property and so on. Again, it's women having the rights of children, or having rights that are more like those of children than like those of men. So all of which is to say, the reason why International Women's Day exists as a phenomenon, why it caught on, is precisely because, one, we have this kind of Christian heresy, which has become political dogma, where groups that are low status for whatever reason, not always, I mean, like, I don't know, paedophiles are an exception to this or something, but the thing that wokeness does generally is try and scoop up these kind of groups marginalized on the basis of certain identity factors, and women get that special treatment because everyone kind of knows we're low status, so we sort of definitionally end up like grouped with the low status people who get all this special, like, political, all these empty political prizes. Also because women benefit from the Women Are Wonderful bias. So it's kind of nice to have International Women's Day and to be everyone say nice things about women. So, I mean, in conclusion, I don't really care about International Women's Day, except to the extent that maybe I could get some, I don't know, lucrative speaking gigs or something. That would be nice. But generally, yeah, I don't really care about it, but I do think that it's quite an interesting phenomenon in terms of being a very good example of what I think is going on in terms of sexual politics.